Hey, what's up you guys? I am back for a new video today, and today I'm going to kind of be talking about mental health and wellness, and more specifically social anxiety and kind of my experience with it and kind of how I have dealt with it recently. This video kind of has two themes. It's kind of along the lines of health and wellness and mental health, but also I want to kind of offer my perspective as an INFJ and kind of tie MBTI into it a little bit. I made a video like probably a few years ago when I first started making videos, and it was like basically a video regarding INFJ stress and anxiety, and I talked about it in a real kind of general sense of kind of my life with anxiety and stress and kind of my experience with it. But today I really wanted to talk more specifically about social anxiety because it's kind of the anxiety that I have dealt with more specifically in my life. I've had bouts of anxiety for other reasons, and I feel like I have actually gotten a lot of freedom in those places, but over the past few years, and kind of throughout my life, I've had periods where my social anxiety would just kind of be bad for some reason. And in the kind of, I had a health video, I think it was about a month ago or 2 months ago, about mind, body, and soul, and how all of those components affect an individual and their personal health and wellness. So today I want to talk about social anxiety and kind of tie it in together with those themes and kind of give you my experience as an INFJ. I know that obviously not all INFJs deal with anxiety. And so I'm not saying that all INFJs deal with social anxiety, but I do feel like I have read and kind of heard from people that social anxiety tends to happen a lot with INFJs. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Again, obviously not all INFJs, but I do think introverts in general and everybody, no matter what your personality type is, can deal with social anxiety. This is not exclusive to me or my type, but I do think that there tends to be a tendency towards it for some INFJs. So, like I said, I've kind of dealt with social anxiety on and off my whole life. I wasn't always super aware that I even dealt with social anxiety, if I'm honest. Looking back as an adult, I can see that I kind of dealt with social anxiety for a really long time throughout my life. But I was not self-aware enough to even know that I dealt with social anxiety. And honestly, it wasn't until like the past 2 years that I'm like really came to terms with, oh wow, I actually really struggle with social anxiety, and this is something that I need to work on and figure out, like, why am I dealing with it? I think mental health is huge, and it's something that I love that more people are talking about. And so, yeah, I kind of just wanted to share my experience in hopes that maybe it would help some people. Maybe these tips can help anyone, or specifically INFJs or introverts. But yeah, so in the past 2 years, about 2 years, I realized that when I moved here to Santa Barbara, my social anxiety was really triggered. And I think it was for a lot of reasons. I think it was situational. It wasn't just completely random. I did move to Santa Barbara. I was in this relationship, long distance. I didn't really know how the relationship was going to pan out. It was a big move for me coming here to be with my now husband, but boyfriend at the time, and taking that leap to move to a new city, not knowing anyone, was a lot. I think I also had graduated college and had been in this internship and odd-end jobs for a while, so it was also the stress of like, what am I gonna do for work? I'm moving to a new city. And I think one of the other huge stressors that kind of triggered a lot of my social anxiety this past 2 years was I ended up moving into a house with 2 girls that I didn't know at all. And I think that really triggered some of it. In the past, I had always had really harmonious living situations. I had lived with about four different apartments / townhomes with groups of girls previous to this, and I've always had I was really lucky. In college I had a good living experience. Like I said, with different groups of roommates, I had wonderful experiences with all the people I lived with, and was always really close to the people I lived with, even if like some of them I didn't know at first, but there was always like a person or two that I knew that was kind of like a connector. And so I moved into this house with two girls who I didn't know very well. I mean, it was an acquaintance that kind of like connected us. But they were like really, really close, best friends, literally did everything together. They bought groceries together, were a part of the same workout program together, cooked all their meals together, went to the same church together, and it was like all these things. And my life was exactly, and they were both single, and my life was exactly the opposite. I worked from home during the day, and so during the evenings, I would want to go out. I wouldn't want to stay at home because I'd been in the house all day. So when they would get home, I would pretty much leave, and like our paths just never really crossed. And because I had such a deep relationship before, it was very awkward. And also, I'm in this serious relationship. I ended up getting engaged while I was living with them. And it was just like, they weren't bad people or anything like that, but it was just, there was no connecting point for us to really build relationships. And because of it, the living situation was so incredibly awkward. And it was such a weird thing for me because, like I said, previous to this, I was always like kind of the one that would brag of being like, yeah, I've never lived in like a weird, awkward situation or had bad roommates. Like, I had always had good roommates. And so this kind of triggered a lot of the anxiety because it was extremely awkward. I could tell they felt awkward, I felt awkward, and then like Caleb would come over, and then it just felt like us and them, and just because of the way that things were set up dynamically. So my living situation was really uncomfortable, and some other things that I really won't go into, but it was just really stressful. So that kind of, I think, was one point that triggered my social anxiety. Like I said, I've always dealt with it, but it was a trigger point that really escalated it in the past 2 years, and it's something that I've been having to work on. And so from there, I just felt in general like I was having a really hard time making friends here. Being in a new city, I knew no one. Caleb and I really did not know anyone. So it was kind of like we had to kind of forge our own path, make our new friends. And then I'm also like, moved here having previously been long distance. And so a lot of our time was trying to invest in each other because we just made this big move literally to live, and be near each other. So it was just weird. And I found myself, in new social settings, really dealing with crazy anxiety. Like, it was to the point where I would get nervous, I would get hot, I would sweat. I found myself either being one or two things. I was either overly talkative to overly compensate for the anxiety that I was feeling, or I was just really quiet. And I had a hard time really being present. And it was like the anxiety would just consume me when I would meet new people. And it was really frustrating and really hard. If anyone has dealt with social anxiety, it can feel very crippling and very frustrating because all you want to do is feel relaxed, and really your heart is just to make connections and have intimacy with people, but it totally blocks you off from that because you become extremely self-aware. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with social anxiety is it takes your attention off the other person and what they're saying and who they are and flips it back onto you, and you get really insecure and self-conscious and self-aware. And I noticed that kept happening in social settings, and it was something that I really had to fight through. I mean, and now this might not be the case for everybody, but one of the things I did to deal with social anxiety was to just keep putting myself in social situations that made me uncomfortable. And it was like pulling teeth for me. I'm not gonna lie. This is kind of what I decided to do to help myself. I understand if you have social anxiety, maybe that's not the way to go. But for me, it was just putting myself in situations even if I felt like it's so anxious. I mean, it was to the point where I'd be in social settings and I would go to the bathroom to literally take deep breaths and to calm my energy down because of the anxiety. And Caleb was sort of aware of this to an extent, but I never really let him know, I think, fully to the extent that I was dealing with it. And another thing with social anxiety is that when you're in groups of social people, I think as an introvert or as an INFJ or someone that's highly sensitive person, all of the external energy and the people and the emotions, especially if you read people really well, it's almost like you can become bombarded with all of that static noise and emotional energy in an area. So not only was I feeling anxiety, but I was also feeling all of that as an introvert, and it made it very hard for me in big groups where it required a lot of constant small talk for me to just be present and to calm down. And it's not like I was like insanely awkward. I do think there was moments where I felt pretty awkward, where, like I said, I would overly talk or be quiet. Not all the times, like I'm also can be a very talkative person. But you internally know when you're dealing with social anxiety. I think it can be hidden as well. And I think I was sometimes good at hiding my anxiety. And I think a lot of people that deal with social anxiety, a lot of people don't even know that they deal with it because we're so self-aware of how we're being and what we're doing, so that we don't, look like an idiot or look anxious, that it's very easy to hide. And I think that a lot of people probably would be maybe surprised to know that I was dealing with such bad social anxiety. And so, yeah, it was going on for like a year and a half, and it was the worst it has been. And I think a couple things triggered it, and then just different limiting beliefs and lies came in to where I wasn't able to fully be myself or fully be present. And I think that's something that social anxiety does, is it takes your attention off the other person, and you can't be present with them. You can't really listen to what they're saying. And in conversation, it makes it very hard to have a conversation because if you're not able to be present with the person, you can't really give a reply back that makes sense because you're so aware of yourself. So yeah, this is something that I deal with and have been really working through. And I feel like I have gotten some success in the past probably 6 months, which I'm very happy about. But I kind of wanted to give you guys some tools of what I've been doing and what I'm continuing to do because I still struggle with it. It's not as bad as it was about a year ago, but it's still, every time I'm in a social setting, I have to remember these things and try to be present. So one of the things that I do with social anxiety is allowing myself to take breaks, because when you're highly anxious, it's hard. Part of the thing that you need to do to calm down is to kind of remove yourself and calm down. So if I'm in social settings and I'm really feeling anxious, I will literally go to the bathroom for a minute and just literally go in the bathroom, take some deep breaths, be more aware of my breath, be more aware of the surroundings, what's going on, and just for a moment try to recenter myself. Now, I think if you're really heavily dealing with social anxiety, that would probably be one of the first steps and a baby step towards getting you to what my next tip is. But my next tip is that the other thing that I do to deal with social anxiety is what I've been practicing now and getting better at, is that when I'm with a person, I try to recognize my breathing patterns. So, a lot of times when you're highly anxious in a social setting, your breathing and your heart rate goes up really, really fast. And it's like you're just like beating and you get hot and you get sweaty because your heart is just like racing. And so one of the tools I've tried to implement with social anxiety is to, when I'm talking to someone, be aware of my breath, my breathing, try to slow it down. I try to center myself and calm myself, just what I did in the bathroom, but I try to practice it when I'm with a person in front of me. And I have found that when I do this and when I practice my breathing, it helps me be more present. So the third tip with social anxiety is to be present, be focused start breathing, and then try to focus on what they're saying. I know that sounds like so obvious and like a duh thing, but when you're someone that's socially anxious, you're too aware of yourself. You're too aware of what you're doing and your behavior. And as an INFJ, I think this really ties into extroverted feeling and being super aware of what other people think of you, which I'll go into in a minute. But yeah, I think it takes away from what the person's actually saying. And so if you as a socially anxious person can be aware and try to focus in on your breathing first and then like focus in on what they're saying so that you can actually have a response back, I have found that that is also extremely helpful. Another thing is to take pauses. And when I am socially anxious, I kind of talk too fast, or I trip over my words, or my sentences don't come out clear. Now, obviously, sometimes it just happens because that happens and I'm not actually socially anxious, but a lot of times I will talk too fast or get caught up in my words and get nervous. And I think if you can like pause a bit between saying things, it's helpful. Because I feel like when you're socially anxious, at least I have all these little like kind of quirky things that are just like not natural and awkward. So yeah, those are some real kind of like practical tips. But something else I want to mention to kind of wrap up this video, because again, it's long. I always think these videos are short, and then I look at the viewfinder and it's like 18 minutes and I'm like, I made another 18-minute video, but it's just hard to like condense this all into a small amount of time. But anyways, the last thing I want to mention about social anxiety is it's usually a root of something deeper. Now, for me, something that really helped me and is helping, because I still deal with this, I'm not free from it, is to realize like, why do I have social anxiety? What is the root problem there? And for me, it was really me caring about what other people thought of me too much, and that desire to make friends in a new city and to have people like me. And I realized that it was a sense of validation, like I need these people to like me, I need new friends. And it really came from a place of like insecurity and not being confident enough in who I am, and just loving myself and not looking for validation for people to like me. And as an INFJ, I'm going to admit that is really hard for me. As an extroverted feeler, I want people to like me, and if I'm honest, I do care what they think to an extent. I mean, not everybody, but to an extent I do care, especially if it's someone that I'm trying to pursue as a friend, that I think it could be a good friendship. It's like I care way too much about what they think and what the outcome is of this relationship that I become anxious and I become not myself and I don't become fully present. And it's like everything that you actually want, it literally does the opposite. Social anxiety. So honestly, if you can get to the root of the situation and figure out like, why am I anxious? For me, like I said, I cared about what other people thought of me and I really wanted to make friends. And those two components overtook me to a point of just being totally anxious. And if you can free yourself from that and really begin to do some deep inner work of realizing, oh, like I am worth being someone's friend. I am really cool. Oh, I have a lot to say. Like I am valuable. I don't need this person to like me to prove that or to feel like I'm well liked. I already like myself, and there's people that love me. And so I have been doing a lot of inner work, and through that inner work, a lot of it has slowly started to dissipate. And I still deal with it. And I deal with it more, I think now, not because, I mean, yes, there's insecurity there, but I've also realized it's also just because sometimes in social situations, if it's a lot of small talk, I just kind of slowly start to like fizzle out as an INFJ. And so I think part of it is that too, where like, if I'm in a place where it's like all these different people and I'm supposed to make, and they're all surrounding me and I'm supposed to make lots of small talk with everyone there, that can just be draining. And I think that's also why I get anxious too. So that's another little tidbit that I wanted to add. It's not always insecurity. Sometimes it's just overwhelm and not really me being fully sincere as a person in those type of environments. But yeah, this was a really long video and I can see that it's reaching 20 minutes. So that is all that I want to say for today, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. Please let me know down below in the comments if you deal with this, if you're an INFJ. You don't have to be. I know we all deal with this. A lot of people do. But yeah, just let me know your thoughts. And yeah, I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.